Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto's abandonment unlocked his hidden training and trained by Kurenai, part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Naruto, it's best to remember that this Shisui person left this scroll for you. He knew he was going to leave soon, that's why he prepared this scroll for you, and only you. Shikamaru said as he sat up from the grass. He gave a long stretch before offering Naruto a small lazy smile. I'm going to get home. If I'm out any later I wouldn't hear the end of it from my mother. Troublesome. He said walking away from Naruto, waving his hand over his head, see ya around Naruto. Naruto gave a quiet goodbye watching the boy walk off. Shikamaru did make some pretty good points about Shisui. He looked down at the black scroll again. After Shikamaru left he spent most of his time alone trying to muster up the courage to open the scroll. Each minute making him more and more scared, what would be inside it? The sun was now starting to set, making the sky have a bright pink hue as the rays of sunlight shone through the clouds. He took a deep breath, with shaky hands he flipped it open. Two small puffs of smoke erupted from the inside making Naruto cough slightly in surprise. Waving his hand to help rid the smoke from blocking his vision. Another scroll was now seen, this one was much larger and it was red in color. In his other hand was a letter. Naruto felt his heartbeat start to quicken, he felt his eyes become glossy as he gripped the paper in each hand, and began reading quietly. Dear Turtle-chan. Hey Naruto, how are you doing? I hope you never have to open the scroll I gave you. But if you are reading this now then yes, I am dead. I hope you can one day understand why I had to write this letter, and I'll start with telling you the truth. The Uchiha clan, for the past year, had been planning to overthrow Konoha in a coup d'etat. I was tasked with a mission to spy and help the village stop the clan before it was too late. If my fears have come true then either the coup d'etat has already happened, or I had to take matters into my own hands. Naruto-kun, I'm so sorry I dragged you into this mess. I just wanted you to have a good childhood. After the very first day we met I knew you were someone special to me. But now Naruto, I leave with you my signature jutsu scrolls. In that red scroll are all the more advanced water jutsus I could find to suit your style. But the main one is my secret to the Shunshin no Jutsu. I hope you can master that jutsu to levels that I only dreamed of. Naruto-kun, now is the time where you can live your life. Make your own choices, be who you wanna be. And always remember, no matter what you do, who you become. You will always be my little brother that I love no matter what. Love Shisui Nisan. Naruto couldn't stop the sudden tears that fell from his eyes. Each drop falling onto the letter softly, making Naruto sob into his hand. I love you too Shisui Nisan. I'll make sure to become a shinobi you will be proud of. Naruto suddenly froze, his heart going numb as he walked into his house. He saw his family all in the backyard, the slider door open letting a cool breeze travel into his home. The scroll Shisui had given him almost slipping from his hands as he looked at his family outside. His mother was smiling happily, his father had a proud look on his face looking down at Natsu and Narumi. Naruto heard his mother's happy voice echo into the house, making him shiver. I'm so proud of you too. It's not every day that two 8-year-olds graduate the academy early. Naruto's heart threatened to stop beating right then and there. His eyes were wide, the sudden burning sensation returning as he saw the setting sun shine down on his siblings' brand new Konoha headbands. Naruto felt a newfound rage gloss over his eyes. The anger trying desperately to block out how inferior he was feeling at seeing his siblings already become shinobi so early. The day he loses the most important thing to him, they get to graduate and become shinobi. The boiling sensation in his skin was almost too much to bear. He wanted to scream, yell, hate them. He was unaware of the sudden change to his left eye, gone was the sapphire blue that everyone was used to. It was now replaced with a dark crimson. his pupil now pitch black with 3 tomo spinning inside. Naruto thought to himself as he rested his hands on his drooping head. Finally, after 5 years he will finally leave this hell, known as the academy. It wasn't just how boring it was how extremely boring it was. Sure, it made sense if a civilian would take these classes, or a newly born child of low-tier clans. They were barely teaching actual shinobi techniques or jutsu. Only the dubbed Academy 3 jutsu. That every child with a decent understanding of chakra could complete within their second year. Even the sparring was just a higher level of kids basically play fighting. They taught each kid the exact same taijutsu stance, a stance so bad that if you stepped 1 foot outside the village you would most likely die within minutes. And to throw oil onto an already burning fire, the acceptable passing grade for shuriken and kunai throwing was a 4/10. A 4. That's basically telling the students, now don't worry kids, if you can barely hit a stationary opponent you surely won't hit one moving. Naruto visibly scoffed at his thoughts. Just the mere idea of the damned academy brought back awful memories. In the beginning, it was hard just being in his siblings' shadow, since almost every kid and teacher praised them for basically breathing. Even later on he was getting overlooked for the more smarter kids in the class, like Sakura Haruno and Sasuke Uchiha. And ever since Natsu and Narumi graduated from the academy at the age of 8, a whopping 3 years earlier than normal, his siblings were labeled prodigies of their generation. While Naruto somehow got the title of dope, since he had no special power of a Biju like Natsu and Narumi, or even special training. And since their graduation, if possible his parents managed to pull even further away from Naruto, spending most of their time and effort accelerating the training of the 2 Namikaze prodigies. While he didn't spend much time at his house anymore, he usually spent the night at Shikamaru's house since they became fast friends after the talk on the cliff. He wasn't sure just how far exactly Natsu and Narumi were compared to him. While he knew he had gotten stronger, Naruto just didn't have the right training or a sensei to even teach him anymore. And it proved rather difficult to grow when it seemed like no one wanted him to. But he now had his trump card, the last gift that Shisui Nissen had given him. The Sharingan. He first discovered that he had the Sharingan after he saw his 2 siblings wearing the village headband, finding out that they did in fact graduate early. It explained why he still had his left eye and only adorned a scar over his socket. Sure, Naruto wasn't 100% sure on exactly what happened that day, but he was certain he had lost his eye. And he technically did lose his eye. After he realized he had the Uchiha clan Dujutsu, he quickly rushed out of the house into his signature training ground. While he really didn't know how to work the Sharingan, it felt like it was getting simpler and simpler as the days went by. Naruto groaned. He was slightly disappointed in his progress in actually using the Sharingan. He wasn't a master by any means. He would say he was about an average Uchiha genin when it comes to using it, but the feat was impressive for a non-Uchiha. He did add a lot more genjutsu to his arsenal since he got the dujutsu, since the element of surprise would benefit him greatly, catching his opponent completely off guard. They would automatically be drawn to his eyes and bam, caught under a genjutsu without even realizing. That's part of the reason why no one knew that he had the Sharingan. He wanted to keep the element of surprise until he couldn't hide it anymore. Also, it wouldn't look too good if someone suddenly popped up having a Sharingan after the Uchiha massacre, especially a non-Uchiha. And even after getting close with Shikamaru, he still debated whether or not to tell the Nara genius. And he didn't tell his family for, well, obvious reasons, but the worst was keeping this a secret from Sasuke. While he and Sasuke weren't really best friends, they did hang out from time to time. Strangely enough, it was Sasuke that came up to him first. Flashback. 2 weeks have passed since the horrible Uchiha massacre, and since Naruto realized he now had a Sharingan implanted into his left eye. Naruto wanted to smile at that, the pain was still fresh. But the mere thought of Shisui giving him the most powerful dujutsu did bring a smile to his face. Naruto smiled a sad smile, looking at his reflection in the lake. He was sitting on a pier with his feet dangling over the edge. His Sharingan eye was active, showing his three tomo as he stared at his reflection. Naruto let his thoughts drift off, letting the full moon shine down over the black abyss, illuminating the lake, giving a peaceful personality to the lake. While it was already past 11 at night, he knew his parents wouldn't be waiting up for him. That thought made Naruto frown. After his talk with his father in the hospital, it seemed that he wanted to finally reconnect as a family. Well, that was certainly the feeling that Naruto got anyway. While Minato did seem worried about Naruto's health when he was in the hospital. As soon as he got home, everything went right back to normal, if so even got worse. Since Natsu and Narumi graduated early, more of his mother's attention got put into their training. His father was a little less involved since his duties as Hokage have been taking up most of his time since the massacre. Suddenly, a loud creaking sound broke Naruto out of his thoughts. After frantically deactivating his Dujutsu, he turned his head to see someone he wasn't expecting. It was Uchiha Sasuke, the lone survivor of the Uchiha clan. Naruto stayed silent as the black-haired boy walked over to him slowly. After a few more steps, he finally came to the blonde, his onyx eyes looking at Naruto's sapphire as he took a seat. Naruto looked away from Sasuke, the boy slightly awkward since he had never talked to the Uchiha before. Several minutes went by as they stayed silent, letting the warm breeze caress their bodies. The air was soothing and it slightly helped Naruto calm his nerves. In the hospital, you mentioned something about Shisui-san. Naruto blinked in sudden surprise at being addressed. The blonde looked over at Sasuke to see onyx eyes almost glaring at him. Naruto pursed his lips. The sudden intensity Sasuke was sending his way was quite intimidating. Sasuke continued, "When you woke up, you said you wanted to stay with. Did you know him?" Naruto slowly nodded his head. He didn't know anyone else was in that room, thought just himself and the nurses. A small smile played on his lips. Shisui Nisan was the one who taught me everything I know. He basically raised me for almost 2 years. Sasuke raised a lone eyebrow at Naruto's words. Raised him? Coming from a son of a cage, it made almost zero sense. Sasuke questioned the blonde about what he meant. The answer he received stunned Sasuke. My partners don't really include me in the family. Everything usually revolves around Natsu and Narumi. Sasuke simply stared at Naruto in complete shock. The Uchiha finally looked away, looking back at his own reflection in the crystal clear lake. His eyes wandered over to the reflection of the boy sitting next to him. Noticing the large vertical scar over his left eye, making Sasuke feel something twinge within him. You know, it was my brother that killed the entire clan. The blonde snapped his head over to Sasuke in disbelief. Naruto's eyes softened. While he didn't know much about the massacre, only that Shisui didn't actually die in the midst of it all. All he knew was that Itachi is the one that committed the genocide. He had no idea Sasuke was related to him. I came to you because Shisui-san was Itachi's best friend. They did everything together. Naruto nodded. He did remember hearing Shisui bring up Itachi on more than one occasion. He pursued his lips yet again. He was most likely the only one to know that the Uchiha were planning a coup d'état, thanks to Shisui's letters. The thought to tell Sasuke right now quickly passed through his head. But it was kept a secret for a reason, and he would honor that secrecy of his sensei. I hate him. I hate him so much. I want to avenge my clan and kill that bastard for what he did. That's not a good way to think about it. Sasuke glared over at Naruto, his head snapping over to him as he let out a snarl. His fists clenched so tight blood started to leak from his palms. And what do you know? You only lost one person that day. I lost everyone that ever mattered to me. Naruto recoiled in slight surprise, but he managed to hold his ground and shake his head. Shisui Nisan once told me that it's okay to hate people, but you should never let that blind you from seeing what really matters, he said, making Sasuke falter slightly. The raven-haired child found it harder to maintain its glare. And what matters is that you had that special time with your family, a loving brother that is still out there somewhere, even if you hate him. I mean, you're still here, right? He said, making Sasuke go wide-eyed. The glare left the Uchiha's face as he processed every word Naruto sent his way. He never thought of it like that. Naruto looked over at him and sent a sad smile his way, the pain shining off his two blue eyes. I never got that special time with my family that I've always wanted. And my brother isn't out there anymore. Flashback end. Ever since then the Namikaze and Uchiha were not best friends. They did sometimes hang out together with Shikamaru, since Sasuke had nowhere to go and Naruto was seemingly not wanted. They all got along pretty well since all of them were reserved in their own right. Naruto paused at his thoughts. Sometimes it was like they were actually completely alone, since neither Shikamaru or Sasuke were much of talkers. Naruto looked around his empty classroom. Most of the chairs were already long forgotten. There were only about 4 students counting himself as he waited to get called up. All he had to do was the basic Academy 3 jutsu. They already passed both the throwing portion and the written test last night. So the blonde waited, and waited for 1 hour to get called. He mentally sighed. Even in test form he was almost at the very bottom. Next up, Namikaze Naruto. Naruto silently cheered as he jumped over his desk and down to the front of the room. The rest of the kids that were waiting to be called rolled their eyes. Most of the class didn't really care for the dope of the academy. His grades were just average and even below most of the clan heirs. So seeing Naruto attempt to show off, in their eyes anyway, left a bitter taste in their mouth. Naruto ignored the looks sent his way and entered the room where the academy instructors were holding the exam. Once he walked through the large door he was met with his teachers for the past 5 years. Iruka Yumino and Mizuki Suzo. Mizuki was just like everyone else. He showered Natsu and Narumi with unneeded praise and kept him in the dust to be forgotten. Iruka was much better in the aspect of actually teaching all kids no matter who they were. While Naruto was still greatly overshadowed, Iruka was the only one that gave him a chance to actually prove himself as a capable shinobi. And while his results were minuscule compared to his siblings, he still tried nonetheless. Okay, Naruto, you know the drill. Let's see what you can do. Naruto wanted to scowl at what Iruka said. He's pretty sure Natsu and Narumi didn't have to go through all the miscellaneous shit that he had to do, like write a 4-page report on the importance of chakra. Without performing any hand seals, a clone of himself came to life right next to him. Within a few seconds the clone of Naruto then was engulfed in smoke, turning into a perfect copy of Iruka, down to the last detail. The real Naruto went to smack the clone on the head, before his hand made contact with the clone, then used a quick substitution with a chair that was in the corner of the room. Soft clapping sounds echoed throughout the tiny room as Mizuki offered a strainful smile. Thankfully Iruka looked real. The clone hanged as Iruka dispersed itself as Iruka offered the boy a village headband. Great job, Naruto. Congratulating on finally graduating. Impressive move making your clone do the required jutsu. But try not to show off so much. Naruto couldn't help but roll his eyes at that. He wasn't surprised in the least, but he knew if anybody else performed like that, it would call for bonus points. And on finally graduating, he scoffed. Even when they aren't here he is getting compared to his siblings. Naruto held his hand out and shook his head. Iruka raised an eyebrow at the blonde. Naruto then reached into his pouch on his leg and unclipped the hatch. After rummaging inside for a few moments he pulled out the familiar headband that Shisui had given him all their years ago. The scared headband and the aged green cloth making both Chunin raise an eyebrow. He tied the headband around his forehead, ignoring the looks of confusion sent his way. Oi Naruto, remember to come back in 1 hour for team assignments. Finally stepping outside he felt a weight get lifted off his shoulder. He was free, finally free. It felt so good to finally be done with that hell. After a few seconds outside he saw his best friend with his arms folded leaning on a tree just outside. Naruto offered the Nara a small wave making him push himself off the tree. Ah, how special waiting for your best friend after graduation. Shikamaru rolled his eyes as he scratched the back of his head, yawning as he did so. Well, Choji already went to see his parents, a pre-celebration with his family. So you're all that's left. Naruto grinned at his friend, throwing his arm around Shikamaru's shoulder, earning a yelp from the Nara. Please, we all know you love me. A sudden scoff reached both boys' ears as Sasuke walked over to him, his headband wrapped around his forehead. Naruto looked over to him in surprise. The Uchiha genius graces us with his presence. Did hell finally freeze over? Shikamaru nudged his friend in the ribs, making Naruto yelp. Sasuke glared over at Naruto and crossed his arms. Sasuke certainly has changed since the massacre. While at the start he was very cold and dark, swearing revenge on his brother for slaughtering his clan. But after his talk with Naruto on the pier he changed again, and this time in a good way. He would never admit it to anyone, but he held Naruto in very high regards, and respects him more than most people. He owes him that much since Naruto helped him out in a very dark time. Naruto was the only one that left an impression on him after all. Naruto wasn't nearly as gifted as his siblings, and after finding out what Naruto's life truly was, it made his respect for the blonde grow. Again, not like he would ever admit it. Whatever, baka. And I see you graduated, surprised you managed to make it through. Naruto narrowed his eyes at Sasuke's smirk. Shikamaru's side next to them, he could already hear the blonde's response in his head. TCH. Please, even second years could pass that test. At least most people scored higher than a 89 on the written test. And there it is. Shikamaru groaned to himself as he heard Sasuke rebuttal back full force. This year in the academy, Sasuke was the only clan heir to score below a 90% on the written portion on the graduation test. And Naruto was never one to pass up a chance to mess with Sasuke. Everyone knew how angry Sasuke got wherever someone mentioned it. Most people were too intimidated to say anything to the Uchiha genius, everyone but Naruto. No matter the reason, no matter the conversation, the blonde always managed to find a way to slip it into day-to-day conversation. Naruto suddenly stopped mid-sentence as the trio looked over to the streets. Most of the gradation class turned over as screeches and yells echoed into the summer air. Naruto frowned as one of the last people he wanted to see came walking over to him. Sasuke flanked his right while Shikamaru had his left, both having matching grimaces. They both know exactly how the Namikaze family treated their friend. To say they were disgusted was a true understatement. It made them nauseous down to their very core, to think that some people so prestigious would literally abandon a child. Hey Ototo, how did the graduation go? I see you managed to pass. The feminine voice belonged to none other than Narumi Namikaze, the only daughter. Her headband secretly tied around her forehead. But the most distinguishing feature was not her headband, it was the dark chunin vest she sported over her black t-shirt. Narumi offered her brother a smile, moving her eyes over the three newly made genin. The past 2 years have been very difficult for Narumi. It wasn't until she noticed that Naruto hasn't been home in literally months that something has been terribly wrong with her brother. And slowly but surely everything came crashing down on her like a pile of bricks. Remembering exactly how their parents left Naruto, and how she never seemed to care. In truth, she felt like shit every time she saw the boy. It was a painful reminder of her failure as an older sister. She tried asking her parents about why they won't train or even acknowledge Naruto's presence. Not once has she gotten a real answer. So each time she brushed it off, still believing they have a real reason. Then there was their brother Natsu. He followed the example of his parents, and while he didn't ignore the blonde completely, he wouldn't treat him like a real brother either. And that was her biggest problem with both her brothers. She's had countless arguments with Natsu on trying to incorporate Naruto back into their lives. But each time it always failed, with either Naruto refusing to do anything with them, or Natsu getting fed up with Naruto's stubbornness. Naruto grunted at his sister, his eyes glancing everywhere else besides her. Yes, I did. Is there a reason you are here, Narumi? The red-headed girl quickly nodded her head as she forced back a frown. She took a few moments to respond. Well, I wanted to see how my little brother was before I left for my mission, she said, trying her best to sound as real as possible. Honestly, she did forget all about Naruto's graduation today. Luckily she was leaving from the west gate or she wouldn't have seen the giant sign on the academy saying, graduation. Besides, Narumi continued, I wanted to see how you were doing. Naruto shrugged his shoulders, turning on his heel. He scoffed, fine as I'll ever be, he spoke, effectively ending the conversation. Narumi frowned at Naruto's back. She wasn't surprised by his answer. But she was sorely disappointed. She gave a heavy sigh and soon left the academy grounds. She had a mission to get to after all. Shikamaru elbowed Naruto in the side, softly making the blonde turn to him. The Nara raised an eyebrow. You good man. Naruto once again shrugged his shoulders, the sudden anger already gone from his body. Sasuke snorted at his side. Hands rested in his pockets as they entered the academy classroom once more. Almost every seat was taken apart from a row of 3 in the front. Sounds of laughter echoed through the halls as kids talked loudly about finally graduating. But sadly their presence did not get ignored. A few heads turned over to them. Especially a head of pink and blonde. Naruto and Shikamaru gave a groan as they covered their ears. Sasuke-kun. Sasuke flinched at his name as 2 almost identical rockets came blasting off towards him. Naruto and Shikamaru took a few steps backwards, leaving Sasuke to his misery. The Uchiha sent them a pleading look, one of the only emotions he allowed his friends to see across his face. The pink rocket snuggled into Sasuke's right shoulder, emitting a moan of content from her lips. While the blonde was on his back, leaning on his neck. Sasuke-kun, I missed you so much. Did you miss me? Before he even had a chance to respond, the blonde on his back scowled. Like hell he would miss your forehead. We all know who he truly misses here. Oh yeah, Ino pig. I bet he doesn't even know your name. You just said my name, Baka. Well, whatever, Ino pig. Naruto shot an amused glance over at Sasuke. That would be Sakura Haruno and Ino Yamanaka. The 2 leaders of the Uchiha fan club, while most girls in the class praised the Uchiha. Sakura and Ino were the only 2 that actually vocalized it. Every single day. Sure, it was funny for a few days, seeing how bad they had it for Sasuke, and it was always fun to see Sasuke's misfortune. But now it turned to a basic obsession for Sasuke, and while the Uchiha was still miserable, no, it still made Naruto laugh. Thankfully, and luckily for Sasuke, the scarred Chunin from earlier entered the classroom. He saw the commotion in the center of the room and his eyebrow twitched. He was so happy this year was over. Everyone shut up and pay attention. Iruka smiled when now every student took their seats. He cleared his throat before he started talking. Okay, I want to say once again, congrats on graduating. Cheers broke out in the classroom. And this year the team assignments are a little different, he said, making the students raise their eyebrows in confusion. Iruka walked around and turned the folder in his arms around, showing it to the class. Usually we assign new genin to their Junin senseis within the week. But this year's graduating class showed exponential growth and promise that Hokage-sama and I have decided that today is the day where we assign the teams. Teams 1 to 6 are fodder, we will skip them. Now Team 7 will be Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, and Ken Gasai. Sensei will be Kakashi Hatake. Sasuke's head fell forward and smacked his desk while Sakura jumped up and down in happiness. Naruto shot Sasuke a look of pity before Iruka continued. Team 8 will be Kiba Inuzuka, Shino Aburame, and Hinata Hyuga. Sensei will be Kurenai Yuhi. All the clan heirs nodded their heads at their team. The more enthusiastic Kiba gave a happy yell. Naruto blinked his eyes, the familiar name sparking something within him. He gave a hidden smile. Looks like she passed the Junin exams. Sucks she couldn't have been my sensei. Team 9 is still in circulation from last year. So Team 10 will have Shikamaru Nara, Choji Akamichi, and Ino Yamanaka. Sensei will be Asuma Sarutobi. Ino groaned loudly, complaining why Kami seemed to hate her. Choji just smiled while Shikamaru was asleep. Naruto raised his eyebrow in confusion, his eyes scanning the classroom as he started to count the students. 25, 26, 27. What the hell, I'm the 28th graduate, he thought to himself with a frown. The class was uneven and every kid has now been put into a squad except him. He was the only one left. Sasuke seemed to notice as well and looked at Naruto with the same amount of confusion. Iruka continued, his eyes looking down at his file in shock. Well, this is new. Team 11 will consist of Naruto Namikaze, Sai, and Shizuka. Sensei will be Anko Mitarashi. The class went silent. No one even knew who those last two kids are. Iruka saw his students' confusion and was right there with them. He read off the file. Sai was trained under Anbu tutelage with the village elder Danzo's supervision. Shizuka is a transfer student from Nadeshiko village. She moved here last week, so I hope you will make them both feel welcomed. After a few moments of letting it all sink in, Iruka explained where they would meet their instructors. Team 7, Kakashi will be up on the roof. Team 8, Kurenai will be at Training Ground 21. Team 10, Asuma will be at Training Ground 99. Team 11, Anko will be at Training Ground 4. Time skip. After class, Naruto stayed silent as he made his way to Training Ground 4. It was the closest training ground to the academy and the walk was only about 10 minutes. On his way, his thoughts drifted to his supposed two teammates. The other male on his team was a boy named Sai, no surname. He was trained by a man named Danzo and was finally able to graduate. Naruto had no idea what to think of Sai. He hadn't met the boy yet, but he was a little skeptical. He was with Anbu all this time. His strength would probably be way more advanced than a regular genin. And the lone female, Shizuka, also had no surname. Now she was a total enigma. He's never heard of Nadeshiko village before, and the info he had of her was she was already a genin before transferring over. So her strength would not be something to laugh about either. So that raised the question, was he as strong as his two mystery teammates? He gave a sigh as he finally entered the training ground, suddenly feeling inferior. As he was walking up, he saw two kids almost his exact age. His brain quickly realizing who they were as he got closer to them. The boy was none other than Sai. He had long black hair with even blacker eyes. His hair was parted in the middle, showing off his Konoha headband. He was wearing a gray shirt that ended right under his chest, allowing his pale midriff to be exposed. He had on black pants with his tan ninja pouch on the leg. He had a large scroll on his back and he was drawing something on a lone piece of paper. His eyes moved over to the lone girl. She also had jet black hair, her bangs threatening to fall into her emerald eyes. Her hair covering her headband from sight. She was wearing a tight blue shirt, with a black cape style going down to her waist, showing off her developing cleavage. She had on tight black pants on with matching combat boots. Shizuka was the first to notice Naruto's entrance. Her green eyes sized the blonde up. He was wearing a regular black t-shirt with a zipped-up red hoodie. He had loose shinobi pants that ended at his ankles. His green sandals matching the cloth on his headband perfectly. His unruly blonde locks falling into his eyes, only being kept up by his headband. She narrowed her eyes at Naruto. Something seemed off about the blonde. And she didn't know a lot of new graduates to already have a scar. I am Shizuka. Naruto's sweat dropped. Well, she didn't sound much like a talker. Sai finally looked up, his onyx eyes dead of any emotion, but a small smile formed on his lips. Hello, I'm Sai, he said as he gave a formal bow. Naruto, feeling awkward, just smiled their way, his hand coming up to scratch the back of his head. Well, I'm Naruto Uzumaki. That was another recent development that has occurred in the blonde's life. It's been a long time since Naruto felt like an actual Namikaze. Every time someone would him with that family, he would always feel like a disappointment or unwanted child. So that's why he came to call himself Uzumaki. It was a small change, but it made himself feel better. An awkward silence fell over the new genin, no one really knowing how to start a conversation. Naruto rubbed his neck as his eyes moved over his two new teammates. Shizuka noticed his lingering gaze and glared at Naruto. "And what are you looking at, pretty boy?" Naruto blinked in confusion before looking away from her, trying his best to hide the soft blush that now resided on his cheeks. "And nothing, just looking at my new team." Shizuka scoffed, crossing her arms over her chest. "Whatever, if I catch you trying to do anything sketchy, I'll make sure to kill you where you stand." Naruto scoffed at her. He wasn't one to just stand around and take threats. He had enough of those already. "I haven't even done anything." Sai smiled at them both, his eyes turning into upside-down U's. "You two would make a cute couple." Both their heads snapped to Sai. Shizuka, seemingly more angry, sent a kunai his way. "And what's that supposed to mean, painter?" "I mean, it's pretty obvious what he meant." Shikazu glared over at Naruto, the blonde grinning mischievously. "I didn't ask you, baka." Sai never lost his smile. He set the paper he was drawing on back to the floor. "Blondie, try not to get tits angry. She has a temper." Shizuka's face heated up as she threw her arms over her chest. Naruto let a snicker leave his mouth. The raven-headed girl grew angrier, but before she could do anything about it, a loud sizzling sound echoed out as a kunai embedded itself right in the center of all three genin. All three genin widened their eyes at the seal that was hanging from the back. "Get back." Naruto tackled Shizuka away as Sai jumped backwards just in time. A loud explosion shook the area while Naruto fell to the ground with Shizuka on top of him. Sai landed next to them. His large scroll was now on the floor with his pen in his right hand. Both Naruto and Shizuka got to their feet and stood next to Sai. Naruto held a kunai in his hand while Shizuka was weaponless. "What the hell was that?" Naruto spoke, his eyes traveling a mile a minute around the clearing. "Trying to locate any sign of danger," Shizuka responded. "That was most likely our sensei. It would explain why she wasn't at the training ground on time." Sai nodded his head. After a few brush strokes, two small birds made of ink raised themselves from his scroll and took into the forest. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the ability, checking it off of ninja abilities he didn't know existed. "My birds are looking around right now. No one spotted," Sai said as he stayed in his position. The remaining students circled Sai, watching the perimeter. Naruto continued for Sai. "All other genin tests all revolved around teamwork. I don't imagine this being any different," he said, both his teammates nodding with him, silently thanking his late sensei for sharing that info with him. Suddenly Sai widened his eyes. Both teammates witnessed this, and before they could speak a word, a large-sized snake came raining down at them. Its mouth opened, showing its large fangs as he attempted to devour Sai whole. Naruto suddenly appeared in front of Sai. His hands formed quick hand seals. Water style. Water shield jutsu. Naruto spun his arms rapidly as a large shield made of pure water formed from his hands. It was large enough to just cover his head as the snake bit down. The fangs connected with the water as it splashed upwards, obscuring the vision of both Naruto and the snake. Suddenly he felt a foot jump on his back and he looked up to see Shizuka propelling herself upwards. She spun in the air as what looked like hundreds of kunai rained down at the snake. Ninja art. Kunai volley. One by one each kunai stuck themselves into the snake's body. Pained hissing escaped the snake's mouth as it released his jaw from Naruto's water jutsu. The blonde jumped backwards, letting the jutsu break as Sai jumped to the side, scroll in hand. Sadly, they didn't communicate well enough as they collided. Naruto smacked Sai in the mouth as they tumbled and rolled on the ground. Shizuka landed next to the groaning boys as she glared down at them. Naruto got to his feet, rubbing his head. "Way to mess that up." Shizuka hissed as Sai smiled over at her. He got to his feet as he gave a few more strokes on the scroll. "It's okay tits, it was an accident." "Stop calling me that." Ninja art. Bear attack. A huge bear made of pure ink materialized out of the scroll. It easily towered over the three genin as it raced off to the snake. Another sound of a kunai soared through the air right at Naruto. The blonde, seeing it coming, reflected it with his own. Shizuka moved fast as she caught the deflected kunai at the hilt as a purple-headed girl crashed down to the clearing. She held a huge white sign in her hands while confetti exploded from the mouths of two snakes that were around her legs. Welcome the amazing and Anko Mitarashi. All three genin stared dumbfounded. This was their sensei. No one said a word while Anko just smiled happily at them. Sure, she was late. It wasn't her fault. She forgot about her genin team and then proceeded to make the sign and convince the snakes to actually spit confetti. So not her fault. Why, you're our sensei? Shizuka gasped out as her eyes widened in pure astonishment. The Junin swayed her purple hair to the side and offered her a wink. Sai looked over at Naruto and pointed his thumb over at Anko. It seems Tits-sensei deserves the name more. Naruto's spine stiffened as he gave a sideways glance over to the now enraged Shizuka and confused Anko. Shizuka smacked Sai on the head really hard, making the black-haired boy fall flat on his face. And what's supposed to mean? She quickly snapped her head to Naruto, aiming the kunai at his throat, and I swear if you anything I will lodge this kunai right in your jugular. Oh, it seems we have a hothead on this team. But if anything is getting lodged into something, I'll be doing it. Anko's voice spoke clearly, echoing in the clearing as she appeared right behind Shizuka, the feeling of cold steel on the young girl's neck as time seemed to freeze. Shizuka still had her grip on Sai while Naruto was still looking down the barrel of a kunai. Anko's voice was sickeningly sweet, the huge smile forever glued to her face. Shizuka cringed at her sensei. Now don't be afraid of little ol' me. I won't hurt ya, she said as she slowly dragged the kunai over her neck softly. Since I can't actually kill you, you know, laws and all. I would only torture you slowly for threatening a fellow Konoha shinobi. Just imagine the soft kunai. Her voice passed her lips smoothly, making Shizuka sick to her stomach. Anko pushed the kunai deeper into her skin, drawing a small amount of blood. Pressing a little deeper. Suddenly Shizuka's body erupted into gold confetti. Anko looked on in shock as she jumped backwards, letting the confetti hit the ground. She looked behind her as she saw the huge snake she sent after the genin was now dead. That bear had ripped it to shreds, while Naruto and the remaining of his team were standing next to the ink bear. Shizuka looked over at Naruto in shock while Sai remained impassive. Naruto grinned at his sensei's expression, as a sudden hand grabbed the back of Anko's body, pressing a kunai to her throat. The purple-haired Kunoichi's eyes glanced to her side to see an exact copy of Naruto behind her. Genjutsu, pretty effective, isn't it? Anko returned the grin. When did you cast it? Naruto explained. The moment you put the kunai to Shizuka's throat. Okay, that was partly the truth, while Anko was distracted on Shizuka and while Sai was facing the ground. He had time to hide his face and activate his Sharingan. He was able to catch Anko's eyes for a split second before she was put under one of his genjutsu. It was a risky move on Naruto's part. His teammates didn't see him weave any hand seals, if they even saw anything to begin with, but he did enjoy the look of pure disbelief on Shizuka's face as he walked over to her and just pushed Anko's arms away. While Sai looked shocked for a moment, Naruto really couldn't tell since it went away as soon as it saw it. Anko let out loud booming laughter as she grinned at the blonde behind her. Her eyes glowing with playfulness. Having fun pressing yourself into my blondie? The clone of Naruto turned a new shade of red as Anko teased him. Before he could move, Anko quickly dispelled the clone, as it erupted into water, soaking the back of her brown trench coat. She took a few steps closer to the new genin and smirked, her tongue coming out to lick her lips hungrily. I will say you three surprised me greatly. Not only were you able to kill that snake, she said, pointing her thumb over at the dead snake. You managed to surprise a Junin-level ninja, and you did it with amazing teamwork with only knowing each other for not even an hour. I'll say that's worthy of passing. Naruto physically beamed at the praise, trying his best to rid the giant blush on his face. Shizuka was a lot more composed since she was already a genin from her hometown. But she couldn't stop the small grin from forming. Sai remained impassive. His eyes stayed blank, but a faintest smile was noticeable. It was subtle but still there. Now we are officially Team 11. Now get ready for hell. Okay. Please report everyone, Minato said happily as he clapped his hands in joy. Out of all jobs that Minato absolutely hated while he was Hokage, he was always excited for the graduation of academy students. Every year he looks forward to it, and this year was no exception. Looking out in front of him were 9 of the strongest Junin that Konoha had to offer. And the test results that Iruka had given him told him that there was a very promising bunch of kids this year. He couldn't contain his excitement and decided to give the kids Junin senseis the day of. He smiled wide as he gestured to his only student in the room. Kakashi-kun, please report. Kakashi's sweat dropped at the Hokage's attitude. Putting down his infamous Ichi Paradise book, he scratched his cheek with a sigh. Team 7 consisting of Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, and Ken Gasai, pass. The whole room was in shock at hearing him actually pass a squad. Even Minato was slightly at a loss for words. Really? What made you pass them and not any other of your teams? A man named Asuma Sarutobi said, taking a long drag of his cigarette, making the woman next to him elbow him slightly in the ribs. Minato nodded. I would also love to hear this, Kakashi-kun. The silver-haired man shrugged his shoulders. Well, at first they were just like every other team I had gotten before. Attacking me all separately and with no plan. The Haruno girl wouldn't stop following the Uchiha kid around like a lost puppy dog. It was really hard to watch. That doesn't explain why you passed them, Kakashi. Kakashi turned his head and gave his signature eye smile to Kurenai Yuhi, waving his hand in the air. I'm getting there, Kurenai. It wasn't until the last 10 minutes of the test that they coordinated an attack against me all at once. Of course they didn't push me very hard at all. But it was a valiant effort. But finally showing signs of teamwork, I decided to pass them. Minato smiled at his explanation. Happy to hear that Kakashi finally passes one of his teams. His eyes shifted over to the person next in line, Kurenai-san. Please report. She nodded, looking back up to her Hokage. Meeting his eyes, and she swallowed a grunt. Team 8 Kansai NG of Kiba Inuzuka, Shino Aburame, and Hinata Hyuga have passed Hokage-sama, she said, making him nod his head. They all worked well together from the moment the test started. It was a good improvement to Hinata-chan as well. Kiba-kun seemed to help her break out of her shell a bit. That's wonderful. I was worried that her shyness would interfere with her abilities, he said, genuinely happy to hear about the girl's improvement. Kurenai nodded before stepping back into place. Okay, Asuma Sarutobi, how was Team 10? The big burly man smiled, as you would expect, Hokage-sama. Shikamaru Nara, Ino Yamanaka, and Choji Akamike performed perfectly. Minato grinned as expected from the next generation of the Ino Shika Cho trio. Last but not least, Minato turned his attention to the last shinobi in the lineup. He felt his enthusiasm start to die down a little as he dreaded what was coming next. Anko Mitarashi, report on Team 11 please. Anko snapped to attention at being addressed so suddenly. She was slightly embarrassed since she was too preoccupied looking at all the pictures that hung on the walls of the Hokage's office. She never knew all the past Hokages were hanging on the wall. She grinned happily as she saluted her leader playfully. Team 11 consisting of Shizuka, Sai, and Naruto Namikaze passed with flying colors, Hokage-sama. She said, not noticing the sigh of relief that Minato breathed out. He was nervous to hear that his youngest wouldn't have graduated, but if he didn't, would it really be his fault? Miento shook his thoughts away. I see. That's wonderful then, he said, making Anko nod. Yes, Hokage-sama. They all work surprisingly well together despite only knowing each other for only about 10 minuets prior to the test. She said, shocking Minato. She continued, they managed to kill one of my snake summons, and Naruto and Shizuka were pretty proficient with their ninjutsu, and that Sai kid was a front runner for ninjutsu. But Naruto, man, did he surprise me. she said, getting everyone present to look at her in question. Minato felt his hands clam up, afraid to ask. How so, Anko? Asuma asked. He was pretty intrigued himself. He had somehow forgotten that Hokage-sama had a third child. Anko turned towards the Sarutobi. Well, I was threatening the Shizuka girl, you know, kunai to the neck, trying to scare her. Everyone pleasantly rolled their eyes, typical Anko. When she just exploded into a ball of confetti, and before I even noticed that blonde Gaki caught me in a genjutsu with a kunai to my neck. The room fell silent, shocked to hear the report on the third Namikaze child. Kurenai was probably the least shocked at hearing that the blonde boy she hadn't seen in a very long time was on Anko's team. She smiled to herself, happy to hear that he was still pursuing genjutsu. Her mind started to drift thinking about him. She hasn't seen the kid since her promotion to Junin almost 5 years ago. Really, Anko? How'd he manage to do that? Asuma said, his cigarette having already fallen out of his mouth in shock. Even the usual stoic Kakashi couldn't help but show a hint of surprise. Anko shrugged. I'm still not really sure when he did it. But it had to be quick, he never weaved a single sign. And as far as I know, you can't perform a genjutsu without hand signs. Kurenai shook her head. That's not true, you can, but it takes an incredible amount of stability and chakra control. Only masters of the art are able to do it. Anko nodded, grinning. Then I might have a genjutsu prodigy on my team. Sweet. He wasn't a one-trick pony either, he had a pretty strong water affinity. She said, turning her attention back to Minato, raising an eyebrow in curiosity. Any reason on why he didn't graduate early with his brother and sister Hokage-sama? He definitely is higher than genin level, she asked, making all eyes turn to Minato. His head started to ache as he panicked at all the expected shinobi eyes on him. He coughed into his fist. Anyway, thank you, Anko-san. Everyone is dismissed. I have some important things I need to look over, he frantically said as one by one the Junin started to leave his office. Unbeknownst to him were the narrowed eyes looking his way as they left the room. Minato put his head in his hands, sweat starting to form on his brow as he looked down at his desk. The mission is simple, we get in there, retrieve the folder and get away as fast as possible. Leave no evidence behind. A soft, powerful feminine voice rang through the forest clearing, bouncing off the decaying oak trees, letting it linger in the summer air. The tone of voice was dark, the holder being horribly serious as her feminine hand rested on one of the trees. Her fingernails tried to pierce the dying bark as her blue eyes wandered around the forest. The voice belonged to the one and only Narumi Namikaze. Her father, the Hokage, put her in charge of a simple retrieval mission just outside the border of Konoha. While this isn't her first retrieval mission, it didn't stop her from being overly serious. She quickly scanned over the area, her eyes coming to rest on an old-looking cabin that was just outside of Tizuna town. Letting the soft breeze flow over her body, allowing the air to slightly calm her. 3 guards on each side of the building, she whispered to herself as her eyes shifted to a cluster of trees just past the cabin. Hiding in the trees are another set of 3, their chakra signatures are much larger, high chunin if I had to estimate. Her bangs fell forward slightly, obscuring her vision and shadowing her eyes. Mission start. Konoha. Sai, I'll kill you. Shizuka yelled, and as what seemed like the 100th kunai left her palms as it soared through the air, all aimed over to the black-haired teammate of Team 11. Sai wasn't a prideful man, hell, he didn't have that many emotions since he was taken into the Anbu at such a young age. And he knows that for as long as he lives, he will never admit that he was scared at this very moment. Really scared. Shizuka tossed another kunai, this one barely nicking Sai across the cheek. Naruto watched from the sidelines in pity. While he did find the affectionate nickname Tits for Shizuka to be quite funny, he knew it was gonna bite the boy in the someday. He didn't expect it to be barely 3 weeks after becoming an official team. So here he was now witnessing a murder attempt while he periodically had to sidestep from a kunai that Shizuka missed Sai with. Their team training with Anko had ended a while ago. She quickly left the training ground and all three genin decided to stay to get a little extra training in. The only rule she gave was to make sure they were well rested for tomorrow. Apparently they were getting a new mission. And just 2 hours went by before all hell broke loose between Team 11. Shizuka, knock it off. At least give him some breathing room. The raven-headed genin snapped her head over to Naruto and gave one of her meanest glares. Her grip tightening around her kunai as her emerald eyes locked within Naruto's own sapphire. Shizuka scoffed as she put her kunai away, letting Sai walk off free. Her eyes never leaving Naruto's. After seeing Sai walk off, he let a small smile grace his lips. Sai was very sweaty, but other than a few cuts here and there, he looked perfectly fine. He turned to Sai. You okay? Sai gave a hesitant nod of gratitude to the blonde as he smiled. Yes, it was a good workout. Please, all you did was run around for an hour. Cardio is important. Naruto sighed as he watched the two start to bicker once again. Well, more like Sai just led Shizuka on until she got fed up and brought her weapons out. His eyes going back and forth between the two. Even though he was starting to get fed up with the constant bickering, it did bring a smile to his face. Feeling like he was a part of a group, as he would be the one to step in. And sometimes be on the receiving end with Shizuka. Naruto thought about that. Sure, they were a team, but they didn't really do anything as a team outside of this training ground and missions. Naruto got both their attention before speaking. Why don't we all go get something to eat? You know, as a team. Both Sai and Shizuka looked at Naruto in sudden surprise. Naruto's sweat dropped. He didn't think it was such a strange thing to ask. They were a team after all. Naruto chuckled nervously at their blank expressions. We could go to that ramen shop Ikiruka, it's pretty good. After a few more moments of tense silence, Shizuka nodded. Yeah, sure. Lead the way. 3 miso ramen for me, please. 1 seafood ramen, please. I'll have what Tita the lady is having. Naruto snickered as Sai quickly shut his insult down by the dark glare Shizuka sent his way. After giving the chef their orders, an awkward silence fell over them. Neither really knowing what to say or even how to talk to each other. So, Naruto started effectively grabbing the attention of the two genin. Why don't we finally get to know one another? Like what we like and dislike. He finished with a smile. He noticed their hesitant looks and gave an awkward laugh. Okay, how about I go first then? My name is Uzumaki Naruto. My likes are training, being with my friends, turtles and Shisui Nisan. I dislike people who abandon anyone, rapists, the usual. And my dream is to prove everyone wrong about me, and make my sensei proud. He said, his voice turning deathly serious, surprising his two teammates. In the last few weeks they haven't seen Naruto seriously at any moment. Sure, they have only done training exercises and a lot of D-rank missions. But this was something entirely different. It seemed like he was much older, way too old for a 13-year-old. Sai was the first to recover, but he felt something trigger within him. His eyes flashed with an foreign emotion that he hasn't felt in years. My name is Sai. I like to paint. I dislike the same things you do. My dream. I guess I don't have one. What? You don't have a dream? All seriousness, that Naruto previously evaporated in seconds. His hands slammed on the table, making his ramen broth leak out of his bowl as he caught the attention of other occupants within the stand. Naruto didn't waver. Is there nothing you ever wanted to do? Or to be? Naruto asked incredulously. Sai once again felt the unfamiliar, feeling trigger inside him once again. He sat there in stunned silence. Anything he thought he should say died in his throat, his mind going too fast to comprehend an appropriate response. So he said the first thing that meant something to him. My dream is to finish my brother's book. Naruto smiled wide. His eyes turned into upside-down U's. He praised Sai for having a meaningful dream, then looked over at Shizuka. The transfer shinobi gave a deep sigh, not really liking the idea of sharing her personal interests. She never did something like this in her home village. My name is Shizuka. I like training, animals and making dolls. She blushed bright red as she noticed both her teammates raise their eyebrows in shock and confusion, mainly Naruto. I dislike the same things you guys do. Plus some. And my dream is to become the world's strongest kunoichi. Naruto smiled wide over at Shizuka. That's great. See, I told you guys this was gonna be fun. He said with a grin, finally feeling comfortable after a solid conversation. Shizuka crossed her arms around her chest. Her ears turned a tad pink as she told her teammates her secrets. She couldn't deny that it was quite interesting to hear what her teammates actually thought and felt. She looked over at Sai to see his face was more blank than usual. His ramen bowl untouched. After a few moments he looked her way, his face morphing into a large smile doing so. The look is completely gone. She broke out of her musing once Naruto began speaking again. Actually Shizuka, I've been wanting to ask you. What is Nadeshiko like? Naruto asked, bringing up his chopstick to his chin in thought. I've never heard of the village before, how was it over there? Shizuka turned her attention to Naruto, tilting her head at the question. She hummed in thought for a moment before answering him. It wasn't very good in Nadeshiko when I was there. There's this stupid rule where once we graduate the academy, we have to leave the village and search for a strong male shinobi. And if we lose in battle they must come to our village and we get married off to them. She finished with a scowl. Naruto looked at her shocked. What? That's ridiculous. Shizuka nodded her head in agreement. I agree. We are just used to creating stronger heirs for our village, basically livestock. Once we get married off we are forced to retire as shinobi and become full-time wives. Naruto clenched his fists at her explanation. Shaking his head, that's so ridiculous. That village is forcing you guys into a life no one wants. He said and Shizuka nodded sadly, yes, but that is why I came to Konoha. She said looking down, a frown on her face. My parents died when I was very young but they were both originally born in Konoha. While Nadeshiko is technically closer to Kiri, I could have gone there. I wanted to experience the village my parents were raised in, she said. Naruto gave her a sympathetic look. Surprisingly, Sai spoke up, trying his best to give the girl a reassuring pat on the shoulder. It was awkward and strained but she appreciated it nonetheless. I know what you mean Shizuka-san. I never knew who my real parents were. I was born in a random little village a few miles from Konoha. But I always heard that they were from the big village that was Konoha. I guess you could say my first real dream is seeing the place they grew up in, he said, allowing them to see just a fraction of his emotions. Naruto nodded as they continued to eat their food in a comfortable silence. After they finished their meal they walked outside back into the streets of Konoha. Naruto breathed in the fresh air as he stretched his body. Shizuki came next to him. Thanks for inviting us out to eat with you Naruto. I actually had a good time. She smiled and Sai nodded next to her. Indeed. Maybe we could do that again sometime. Naruto's eyes lit up in glee as he nodded happily. Of course I would be happy too. We are a team after all. Well, if it isn't my little Ototo. Naruto felt himself tense up. Shizuka and Sai both noticed Naruto's body tense up. They turned their heads over to the front of the stand to see the fabled Natsu Namikaze leaning just outside of the stand. A smirk plastered on his face, his Chunin vest glowing as he had an open red coat over it. His village headband wrapped around his neck hanging loosely as he crossed his arms around his chest. He held his head up high. His smirk, if possible, seemed to stretch further across his face. His eyes switched over to the rest of the team slowly. You both will have to excuse my little brother here. He gets a bit overzealous most of the time. Naruto clenched his fists as he looked at his brother. His whole family always finds a way to ruin a good day. When he's with friends, his team, or alone time, they always find a way to make his life more and more miserable. He had no words for his brother, wanting his very presence gone from the shop. Shizuka on the other hand was showing signs of pure bewilderment. She snapped her head over to Naruto. Wait, be brother. Natsu chuckled as he reached over and threw his arm around Shizuka. The black-haired girl blushed from the sudden PDA but couldn't look away from his hypnotizing amethyst eyes staring back at her, mere inches away from her face. Oh, he didn't tell you. I knew it was always hard to be kept under our shadows after all. So I can't blame him. What are you doing here, Natsu? Naruto growled between his teeth, the mere presence of his brother bothering him. Natsu is the one family member he saw the least. He was usually always on missions or training with their mother or father. Natsu grunted as he removed himself from the black-headed girl and grabbed a bag of ramen that was sitting on the counter. Tu-san asked me to pick up some ramen for the trip. This time Naruto looked back to see his brother. His eyes frowning in confusion. Natsu smirked again. Oh yes, did I forget to mention? Tu-san and Ka-san are taking me to Mount Myoboku to practice my sage training a year early. Naruto felt his blood run cold. His eyes went wide as Natsu held his head up. Satisfied with the reaction he got from Naruto, he turned to leave the stand. It was great seeing you and your team, Odoto. With one last glance back, his purple eyes darkened considerably. Try to keep up. A tense silence shifted through the air as soon as Natsu left. Naruto's eyes were downcast, his hair falling past his forehead as his teammates stood there awkwardly. Shizuka reacted first as she patted Naruto on the shoulder. Hey, I don't really know what just happened, but. It's fine, Shizuka, Naruto said, interrupting her as he patted her own hand down with his before sliding hers off. I'm used to it, he said, forcing a smile. Unluckily for him, Shizuka shook her head adamantly at him. No Kandubaka. We shared about our family, now it's your turn. So spill. Naruto frowned, sending a slightly pleading look towards the emerald-eyed girl. Can I tell you another time? It's a very long story. Before Shizuka could respond, Sai interjected himself. Yes. Maybe next time we go out for lunch, he said. He could tell the blonde wasn't in a good enough mood to talk. Naruto gave Sai an appreciative nod before averting his eyes back to Shizuka. She looked like she was about to protest, but ultimately she gave in. Letting out an irritated sigh, she pointed at the blonde. Fine. But you will tell us. I promise I will, he said before excusing himself and walking away from the ramen stand, leaving his two teammates behind. Shizuka scowled as she turned over to Sai in confusion. Why did you let it go so easily? It seemed to really bother him. And that was Natsu Namikaze. Sai shook his head at her, watching his blonde teammate walk off. Yes, it was. But whatever happened here, it seemed to have affected Blondie-kun deeply. He was in no mood to communicate his feelings, I'm sure you could tell. Shizuka frowned at his answer, turning her head as she followed the back of the blonde. She gave a hesitant nod. Yeah, I could tell. I wonder what happened between them. Sai shrugged. In my time training with the Anbu, I knew that Naruto was related to the Namikazes. But I didn't know they held so much disdain for one another. But the feeling I got from Natsu-san. It wasn't pleasant. Shizuka nodded, agreeing with him. Let's leave Blondie-kun alone for now, Tits-chan. He'll tell us when he's ready. Shizuka couldn't even find it in herself to yell at Sai this time. Can you at least give me a better nickname? I will dwell on the possibility. Okay, spill it, Missy. How did it go? Anko pestered at Kurenai as they walked through the streets of Konoha. Kurenai sighed, rubbing her temples in irritation. I already told you. He just took me to a coffee shop. We talked for about 2 hours and then we parted ways, she said with Anko frowning at her. Jumping in front of Kurenai and walking backwards with her hands behind her head. Ignoring the passers-by who looked at her in annoyance. Did you guys kiss at all? Maybe even second base? The purple-haired Kunoichi said, wiggled her eyebrows at Kurenai. Anko. Kurenai quietly yelled at her friend, a small blush forming on her cheeks. Anko snickered at her friend before turning back around. I know, I'm just teasing you, she said before finally coming into view of her favorite dango shop. Her mouth started to water as her eyes started to glisten. She quickly pulled Kurenai inside, grabbing a table by the open window. Kurenai glared at her. Couldn't you have just asked me to hurry it up and not drag me? Anko nodded her head. I could. But why would I? Kurenai sighed in irritation before breaking out into a small smile. Clearly amused by her friend's antics. It was one of the reasons why she loved spending time with Anko. She was always honest, maybe a little too honest. But it added to her charm in Kurenai's opinion. After pushing past her rough exterior, you were met with one of the most selfless human beings you would ever meet. Kurenai knew how high Anko valued her friendships, they were the most important thing to her. And she would always have your back no matter what. Something Kurenai loved her for. As they ordered their food, Kurenai straightened her posture, letting the comforting breeze calm her down. She was silently happy that Anko had picked out a table next to the window. So nothing happened with Asuma, huh? Kurenai sighed as she shrugged her shoulders at her friend, closing her eyes, letting them have a short-lived rest. No, just a regular trip to the coffee shop, she said irritably. Her and Asuma have been flirting back and forth for several months and the man refused to officially ask her out. She was beginning to think he wasn't interested in her anymore. Anko threw her arm over the chair next to her, using a Senbon needle to pick at her teeth. Well, can't say I'm surprised. He may act tough, but he's a total, she said, spitting out the piece of food she finally removed from her gums. Do you still even like him at this point? Kurenai had to take a moment to think about it. He was a very sweet man, but he never acted on any of his decisions. So yeah, she liked him. He was one of the only men in Konoha who she would consider boyfriend material. But over the past few months she didn't know if she just liked him as a friend. So Kurenai hesitantly shook her head. I don't know. He's very sweet and treats me like an equal. But he's been more off-putting lately than usual. He doesn't really talk either, and that damn smoking. Anko nodded at her in understanding. Just another bust in Konoha no Sato. If you want to, I can set up a blind date for you. Kurani felt all the blood drain away from her face. The last time Anko set up a date for here, let's just say it ended with a lot of screaming, a lot of vomit and a passed out sushi chef. Coughing into her fist, she quickly changed subjects. Anyway, how's your genin team? Kurenai asked, regaining her composure. Anko grinned her way. Kurenai was shocked to see a look of pride gleam over her eyes. Kurenai has been curious about Team 11 since the meeting they all had in the Hokage's office 3 weeks ago. Mainly because she was curious about how Naruto was doing. A sullen look glazed her eyes as she recalled how fidgety the Yondaime was at the mention of Naruto during the meeting. I guess things are still dicey with them. I hope he's doing okay. Honestly, I really didn't want to take a genin squad at all. But I'm glad I did. Ku-chan. Those kids are pretty good for being just genin. Their teamwork is still a little rough around the edges, but other than that I have no complaints, she said, grinning. Kurenai nodded. How is Naruto? Anko raised an eyebrow in confusion at the odd question. Turning her attention to Kurenai, tilting her head. Kurenai schooled her emotions as she felt a bead of sweat form on her brow. Only Anko could ever make her uncomfortable by just a simple stare. Anko was about to answer the odd question before her eyes caught a glimpse of a familiar mop of blonde hair walking past the stand. Her face broke out into a devious smirk. Why don't you ask him yourself? Standing up abruptly, she pushed past Kurenai, leaning her head out the window. Anko, what are you? Hey Naruto, ku. Over here. Naruto jumped in surprise in the street as he snapped his head around, looking for where the scream came from. The blonde looked to his left to see his sensei practically falling out of a window, waving her hands in his direction. Looking past her, he was able to catch a glimpse of very familiar crimson-red eyes that left such a powerful impression on him years ago. He felt his cheeks start to heat up as he looked at the lady next to his sensei. She was wearing a tight bandage-looking battle dress with bandages wrapped around her arms, stopping just before her forearm. Kurenai-san. He thought as his mind started to go blank the longer he stared in her direction, his sensei completely forgotten. She was breathtaking. He had never seen someone so beautiful before. While he knew she was beautiful when he saw her 5 years ago, but he didn't really think much of it back then. After all, He was only a child. Anko watched as he froze in the street. You gonna stand there all damn day? Hurry in here. She yelled, breaking Naruto out of his trance as he rushed into the dango shop, looking at Anko. Sorry Anko-sensei. He said, bringing his hand up to scratch the back of his head. Kurenai looked at the boy as he and Anko started to talk. She looked him up and down. Wow, he really grew up. He almost looks like a completely different person, she thought as she smiled at seeing him scratch his head. A habit he seemed to have kept all these years. Moving her eyes up his body, she couldn't help but notice the large scar over his left eye. She swallowed back a gasp as she traced it with her eyes. Something sparked within her. She wanted to reach out and wipe away the imaginary tears on his face. Like she had done all those years ago. Anyway, Gaki-ku-chan here was actually just asking about you. Anko said, drawing her attention, making Naruto blush a bit. Naruto turned towards Kurenai as she nodded. Yes. I wanted to see how you were doing, it's been a long time after all, she said, offering a smile making him return it with ease. Anko tilted her head, more confused now than she was before. She didn't know that Kurenai knew Naruto. Deciding to be a good friend for once, she stood up from her seat. Well, it seems you two kids have some catching up to do. So I'll leave you to it, she said as Kurenai looked at Anko sadly. She did feel bad. She and Anko hadn't hung out in a long time and she knew her purple-headed friend was looking forward to it. Anko swatted her hand, as Anko gave her a grin. Don't worry about Lil ol Miku-chan. We can meet up later. I'm gonna go piss off Kakashi, she said before winking and leaving the stand. Kurenai sighed as she watched her friend walk out, promising to make it up to her. Naruto laughed awkwardly, standing near the table. Sorry about that, Kurenai-san. I didn't mean to interrupt anything. She offered a small smile before matinoing the blonde to sit across from her. Don't apologize. We are the ones who called you over after all. Naruto nodded before taking his seat at the table. They began to catch up on what's new with them in the past 5 years. From Naruto becoming a genin and Kurenai passing her Junin exams. Minutes soon turned to hours as they stayed in the food stand enjoying the pleasant company. They got on the topic of genjutsu and she was excited to hear that he kept up his rigorous training and was slowly getting better and better each day. She told him how Anko bragged about him in the meeting with the Hokage that he managed to catch her in hand seal-less genjutsu. Naruto blushed at the praise, making Kurenai giggle slightly, finding his blush to be incredibly cute. Getting lost in mindless chatter, they were soon kicked out of the stand, staying well past closing time. Naruto offered to walk her home and she agreed, touched by his kind gesture. On the way to her apartment, she couldn't help but sneak a peek back at the boy. She was pleasantly surprised by how much she enjoyed her night tonight. While she only thought they were going to just talk for almost an hour, they ended up spending more than half of the evening at the shop. So long in fact that they decided to even have dinner there. He was all in all, a perfect gentleman. Even though this wasn't a date, she had wished that the last date she had went as good as this. Asuma had never walked her home before. But her mind quickly switched topics. Say Naruto-kun, can I ask you something? Naruto nodded his head at her. Kurenai went silent for a moment, trying her best to figure out what words she wanted to say exactly. How is everything going, with your family? She said softly, making Naruto look down to the floor. Kurenai after a moment turned her head to see that Naruto had stopped walking and was frozen in place. Kurani was about to apologize, but Naruto spoke up before she could. Clenching his fists tightly, he looked at the ground, biting his lip. Everything is alright, Kurenai-san. Same old, same old. Kurenai felt her eyes soften before grabbing his arm. Naruto looked up at her in confusion as she guided him to a small bench. Take a seat, Naruto-kun, she said, making Naruto glance in confusion, but I was just supposed to walk you home. Kurenai nodded before pointing to her right. My apartment is right around the corner. But now I just wanna talk. He nodded his head and took the seat directly next to her. putting his hands together as he sat awkwardly next to Kurenai. It was tense on the bench, neither knowing really how to spark up such a serious topic. It was dark outside, their only source of light was the street lamp that resided next to the bench. Kurenai took several deep breaths before shifting her body to the blonde boy. Do you wanna talk about it? Naruto stayed silent as he tightened his hands together. He didn't wanna burden Kurenai with his life, he felt bad already delaying their trip because of his problems. But he knew the longer he let this sit and marinate in his mind it would soon explode on him. Shutting his eyes, his scar pulsing with phantom pain as his stomach scent flips internally within him. It's just. He started out, Kurenai giving him her full attention. Once Shisui-Nisan died I was really hoping things would get better. I was praying, I really needed someone there for me. I made friends at the academy. But no one could ever replace Shisui-Nisan, he said. His voice cracking several times during his speech. His body hunching over as he let out a quiet sob. Everything just got worse. Natsu and Narumi managed to graduate early leaving me behind. My parents pulled even further away if that was even possible, and I lost support from the only person who was there for me. No one wants me, everyone always leaves me, I guess. I'm just not special enough, he said as more and more sobs escaped his throat. Kurenai looked at Naruto with a heavy heart. Her own heart breaking at the very sight of him. She watched as the dam holding back his true feelings started to crack, letting his emotions leak out. Kurenai softly removed his hands from their grip and intertwined their hands together. Naruto-kun, look at me. Naruto remained still as he tried to calm down his erratic breathing. He didn't want to look at her, he already felt bad enough putting her through this. She probably hated him for it, she probably wanted to chastise him for being such a baby, for crying about all the bad things going on in his life. Please. Her voice was soft, it felt like silk as it left her soft lips and floated themselves over Naruto's skin. Naruto felt his pulse quicken as he slowly lifted his eyes expecting to see disappointment and anger. It surprised him greatly when her crimson eyes held nothing but warmth, it was almost intoxicating to look at. He felt his cheeks start to heat up from her stare, his eyes couldn't help but drift down to her soft red-laced lips. She released one of her hands, bringing it up to Naruto's left eye. Slowly wiping away his remaining tears as she looked at his beautiful blue eyes. Her thumb slowly caressing the bottom of his scar tenderly. Don't say things like that, Naruto-kun. Your family is just full of idiots. You are one of the most special, strongest people I have ever met. And you could use this time to be you, the you that you wanna be, she said, offering the boy a smile filled with so much warmth. Hell, if I had to go through what you did I wouldn't have even made it a day, she chuckled to herself. Naruto sat there quietly letting her words echo through his mind. His stomach started to calm down a bit as he leaned slightly into her touch. And just remember, Naruto-kun, you have a duty to prove them wrong, right? Naruto widened his eyes a bit as he turned his gaze back onto Kurenai. The corner of his lips started to lift upwards as he nodded to Kurenai. His eyes shining with newfound determination. Yeah, that's right. Okay, my cute genin. This mission is very easy, so I better not hear any complaining. We are to deliver this letter. The purple-headed Junin of Team 11 raises her arm to show the neatly packaged letter in her hand. To the mayor of Tizuna town, her name is Maikisu and the town is only about a few hours away. And this is our first sea tank mission. Anko explained loudly, throwing her arms up in the air in emphasis, hoping to see her slaves genin yell in excitement with her. She pouted when she saw that all three were wearing the exact same look of melancholic, thoughtful expressions on their faces. Shizuka was the only one who showed any real excitement about the mission as she broke out into a small grin. Coughing into her fist, she frowned. You guys are boring, she said with a pout, making all three genin sweat drop. Without waiting for a response, Anko took the lead in front, Sai and Shizuka flaking her sides with Naruto watching the back. A comfortable silence fell over the team as Naruto was lost in his own thoughts. His mind wandered back to last night's events talking with Kurenai. He couldn't help but smile as he recalled her words. She was right, he needed to push past this and show them exactly what they were missing. He was thankful he talked with her. She even agreed to train him in genjutsu once he returned from his mission. He was ecstatic to hear that and was already looking forward to coming back. He took this time to look around the forest as him and his team ventured further in. It was his first time out of the village. It felt kinda surreal to finally escape the walls of Konoha. It was almost freeing in a way. Enko's voice broke him out of his trance. Okay team, we are about 4 hours away from Tizuna town. We're gonna make a small campfire and get there first thing tomorrow morning. Enko explained, then went ahead and gave everyone little duties in order to set up camp. Sai was in charge of getting firewood, Shizuka was to put together the tents, and Naruto to distribute the food. Naruto finished his task fairly quickly and sat on one of the wooden tree stumps, idly waiting for his team to finish their respective tasks. His eyes scanning over his team, he would make sure to apologize to them later on for rudely brushing them off yesterday. Hey kid, how was your date with Kurenai-chan last night? Enko said, effectively getting the attention of all three genin as she looked down at Naruto, arms crossed over her chest as she grinned. Naruto blushed deeply, his face resembling that of a ripe tomato. Date. Shizuka muttered, looking up at Naruto in shock, the tent falling out of her hand. Naruto waved his hands in defense, rapidly shaking his head. It wasn't a date. We just talked, that was all. Enko tried to fight back a laugh as she saw his face explode in embarrassment. She wished she brought her camera. She shrugged her shoulders, talking the seat next to him. I don't know about that, Naruto-kun, you guys were out for quite a long time. Kurenai-san, isn't she the sensei of Team 8? Sai said, his hand coming up to his chin in thought. Shizuka's eyes, if possible, grew even wider. Sai hummed as he dropped the firewood he was holding, giving a nod of approval. I didn't think you were into older woman, Blondie-kun. I'm not. And it wasn't a date, damn it. We just happened to know each other. He said, trying his best to fight back his aggressive blush. Shizuka shook off her shock before continuing to set up the tent. Enko started to laugh before smacking Naruto in the back. The blonde yelped slightly at the impact. Just messing with you, kid. Slightly, she said, whispering the last part before rubbing her neck. Actually, Blondie-kun, how do you know Ku-chan? She said, her curiosity piqued as she put a hand on her knee. This seemed to grab the others' attention as well as they nodded in agreement. Naruto sighed to himself as he managed to get rid of his blush. Looking up, he told Shizuka and Sai to take a seat. He did promise he would tell them everything. And we are a team after all. And so he told them everything, from his family's treatment to his meeting with Shisui, and when he first met Kurenai all those years ago. As he finished his talk, he took in a deep breath, feeling somewhat good to get it all out again. Looking up, he was met with the speechless looks from his team. And that's how you got that? Shizuka said, pointing to her own left eye as Naruto nodded. A sad smile on his face. Yeah, jumped in front of a kunai in fear for Shisui-nisan. Whoever he was fighting wasn't phased in the slightest and sliced at my open eye. I was lucky enough that he didn't do enough damage to blind me. He lied, not willing to share his biggest secret. He brought his hand up, rubbing it slightly. Enko spoke up this time, her usually laid back and playful attitude gone. I can't believe it, Hokage-sama. She muttered, shaking her head in disbelief. How did you deal with it, Naruto? With your family, Sai said, cutting into the conversation. His expression unreadable. Naruto blinked in thought before staring deep into the bright orange flames of their campfire. After a while he shook his head. I haven't, I'm still trying to. But last night I was told something very important. That I have to focus on myself, to prove them all wrong. I know that I'll never be a part of that family, which is why I dropped the Namikaze name. He smiled a bittersweet smile as he rubbed the back of his head. Doesn't it bother you? Shizuka asked unexpectedly. Her voice raised quite a bit as both male teammates and Anko were taken aback at her sudden outburst. Shizuka had the audacity to look sheepish as her cheeks turned into a light shade of pink. She gave an awkward smile as she muttered a soft apology. Naruto slowly nodded his head at her, ignoring her apology. Well, of course it bothers me, he said, his teeth clenching, but I tried to get on their good side countless times. I tried to be there as much as I could. But there's only so much I can do. So you gave up? Surprisingly, it was Sai that asked this question. Naruto looked shocked at his question as a loud silence fell over the genin. Sai never took his eyes off the blonde. Naruto digested what was said to him. He looked down into the burning fire. Sai's stare was starting to make him uncomfortable. No, I wouldn't say I gave up. I just accepted it. Sai widened his eyes as he sat there in silence. In fact, no one else knew what to say as they sat listening to the crackling fire. Anko suddenly clapped her hands, her face morphing back into her usual playful attitude, throwing her arm around Naruto's shoulder. Ah, who needs them anyway? And don't act all mopey baka. Don't forget that you're part of something great here. The soon-to-be strongest team in Konoha with the hottest sensei around, she said, nudging the blonde as she pointed a thumb over to Sai and Shizuka. Naruto looked at her shocked before looking into the equally shocked eyes of his team. They all looked at each other, nodding to themselves. The atmosphere seemed to change as they exchanged glances. Now they felt like a real team. Yeah, you're right, Enko-sensei. So let's get this party started, shall we? Who's ready for guard duty? All three genin groaned. 3. Morning came very quickly for Team 11. After Anko gave them the rundown for guard duty, all genin took 3-hour intervals while rotating. It was highly effective and each for a good amount of sleep to feel refreshed when they woke up. It didn't take them long to pack up their remaining items and continue on the road to Tizuna town. It was a beautiful day, the grass was shining and there was a light breeze making the giant trees sway regally. Flowers were starting to wilt, a lot of them already losing their color and stooping down, only being kept alive by the sun rays. Shizuka and Anko made small talk as they stayed in formation A. Anko in the front, Shizuka on the left, Naruto on the right and Sai to the back. Naruto looked around the forest. The further and further they got from Konoha, the more beautiful it seemed to become. There were more wildlife running around as he watched several rabbits run around the trees and sip water from several small puddles around the area. Looking up, it was met with the scorching summer sun blazing down on them. He slightly envied Sai at this moment. Having a shirt that only covered half his stomach. Anko stopped her track as she turned back to the genin, motioning them to look behind her as she waved her hand regally. Ladies and gentlemen, Tizuna town. Anko said as the gates to the town finally came into view. The gates were not as large as Konoha's, but it was still impressive. Walking right through the gates, they noticed that the town was bustling with life. People were running around with shopping bags and several stands were trying their best to get you to buy their products. Naruto looked around the town with growing excitement. It was a relatively small town, but the amount of life and energy was shared the moment they walked inside. Following Anko's lead, they finally stopped there, walking in front of the largest building in the whole town. Anko turned back to the kids, nodding her head. You guys ready? Seeing all three genin nod, she grabbed the door knob, pushing the door open. Walking inside was almost like walking through to a different dimension. The room was a dark brown color as several pictures hung on the wall with people Naruto didn't recognize. In the corner were several chairs with a nightstand with magazines stacked on top on one another. The air even felt more proper, more refined. Ah, Shinobi-san, are you here to see Kisu-sama? A voice said as Naruto turned his head to see a blonde woman behind a desk, a smile plastered on her face. Anko nodded before reaching into her pouch and pulling the letter the Hokage had given her. Yes, I need to hand-deliver this letter Hokage-sama had written personally. The blonde woman nodded before offering another one of her smiles. After a moment of looking over some papers on her desk, she pointed to the large door across from them. Yes, of course. She is right through those doors. But there is another Konoha shinobi here, so your time might be cut short just a bit. Anko raised an eyebrow at that. The girl continued, if you would like I can schedule a meeting with Kisu-sama for tomorrow morning. Anko waved her hand. No, that's okay. We don't need much time with her anyway. The blonde women nodded before they walked into the spacious room. Kisu was sitting behind her desk with a nervous look on her face. Her hands intertwined as she was reading a document in front of her. Standing next to the desk was an all too familiar person. Naruto widened his eyes as he saw the person's very own blue eyes raise in shock at his entrance. Kisu looked up from her desk and lit up as she saw the team. Ah, Shinobi-san, she said, getting up from her seat and offering Anko a handshake. Anko snapped out of her own shock and returned the gesture. Handing the letter over to Kisu, a pleasure, Kisu-san, we were asked to deliver this letter to you from Hokage-sama himself. Kisu nodded before turning back to the shinobi who was by her desk, her face going back to worry. Narumi-san, do you think these shinobi will be enough? The now identified Narumi tore her eyes away from her brother as she looked back to Kisu. She stayed silent for a few moments. I'm not sure, I haven't worked with any of these shinobi before, she said as rising guilt erupted in her stomach as she looked back to her brother. Sadly, she knew absolutely nothing about her brother's skill as a shinobi. Anko, while never working with her personally, knew she was more than just a capable shinobi. She was trained personally by Orochimaru of the Sennin, before his defection. The other two on the squad she knew nothing about, not even their names. Enough for what exactly? Anko spoke up, crossing her arms over her chest, narrowing her eyes at Narumi, making the girl blink in confusion. Kisu rubbed her arm as she looked down at the ground nervously. Well, you see, she said, not sure how to exactly put her thoughts into words. It seems people are targeting me in this town, bad people. She finished, making Anko raise an eyebrow. What, like some bandits? We can take care of that easily. Narumi shook her head in response, grabbing the document on Kisu's desk and showing it to Anko. Worse, after my mission I was supposed to deliver this letter back to Kisu-san, but, she said, flipping the page over. All three genin perked up at this as Narumi channeled chakra into the page, making words that weren't previously there before appear diagonally across. Anko leaned in, her eyes scanning over the page. Her eyes lit up in recognition. The blue flames, Anko said. Narumi nodded, placing the page back onto Kisu's desk. Yes, apparently they have been seen venturing around Tizuna town for a while now. I suspect they will target Tizuna next. Shizuka shook her head confused. Wait, who are these blue flames? She said. She had never heard that name before in her life. The Blue Flames, a B-class group of rogue ninja that go around targeting smaller towns and villages in order to seize control of them. They specialize in fire jutsu and are remarkable at assassination techniques. They will kill anyone who gets in their way. They are pure evil. Sai spoke up as he crossed his arms. His eyes closed as he relayed the information. Narumi looked at him in mild shock before masking it. She nodded her head again. Sai hummed, but what use would they have in targeting Tizuna town? He asked, opening his eyes looking at Kisu. The woman flinched as the boy's piercing black eyes stared back at her. She forced herself to look away. All eyes were on her now as she played with a piece of brown hair that was framing her face. I don't know. We are a trading town. We trade our wood for goods like fish and livestock. Unless they want to take over our trades as well? She asked as she placed a hand on her chest. Calm down, Kisu-san. Getting worked up now will only cause more problems. Narumi said as she tried to calm down the shaking mayor. What kind of wood does your town gather, Kisu-san? Anko asked as the now calmer Kisu looked up at her. Kisu tilted her head. We have an abundant supply of genus wood, so that's our main trading material. Genus wood. Naruto spoke up for the first time as he looked up shocked. His team looked back at him in confusion as Naruto began to slowly walk towards Kisu's desk. Is your desk also made out of genus wood? Kisu frowned and nodded her head. Narumi scowled at her brother. shaking her head exaggeratedly. There was a real problem here and all he could think about was the craftsmanship of her desk. Naruto ni there are more impor. Genus wood is very chakra conductive, with enough you can even make it harder than steel, and even so resilient where it won't even break. He said, stopping Narumi in her tracks. His eyes traced over to his and she couldn't help but stare back. Blue eyes that looked so foreign to her, she couldn't recognize the boy as he looked at her. He was a complete and utter stranger. Slightly backing down from his gaze, she nodded her head. Naruto grabbed the edge of the desk, channeling chakra through it. The desk started to glow a soft blue color before the light-colored wood started to change into a deep black. Kisu gasped, throwing her hand over her mouth. That's what they're after. With enough of this wood they could make weapons, armor, and who knows what else. Naruto said, removing his hand from the desk, letting it revert back to its original light color. Kisu looked down at Naruto, her eyes wide in need. Will you guys help and take down this group? Please, I don't want anything to happen to this town. Naruto shifted awkwardly as he looked back to Anko. The purple-haired Junin seemed to be in deep thought. While she wanted to help Tizuna Town, she didn't know if her team was officially qualified for it. If they weren't here, then it would be no problem. Hell, she and Narumi would be able to take them out. Looking back to Sai and Shizuka, they both already had battle experience. Sai was in Anbu before the team was created, and Shizuka was a genin in her previous village for about a year. But Naruto, she thought as she looked back at him. She knew he was good for a genin, better than he gave himself credit for. Yet he lacked battle experience, but as she looked into his eyes she saw this fire of determination that was unyielding. Taking one last glance to Narumi told her all she needed to know. Anko nodded before offering Kisu a grin. Well, what can I say? Team 11 is on the case. Kisu had tears in her eyes as she bowed deeply to the shinobi in her office, showing her gratitude, making Team 11 smile happily. Narumi coughed, grabbing everyone's attention. Kisu-san, do you maybe have a spare room where we could discuss the mission details? Kisu nodded enthusiastically. How about you use my office? I will go and check up on things in the village, and I'll inform Suzy at the front desk. Please take your time. Narumi nodded as Kisu quickly excused herself, leaving Narumi alone with Team 11. Fighting back a frown as she noticed her brother walk up to Shizuka. Narumi pushed her thoughts into the back of her head as Anko walked up, grabbing the document again and looking it over. Rubbing her chin in thought. Narumi-san, when did you get this? Yesterday evening. When I returned from the cabin, Kisu-san was already asleep, so I had to wait till the morning to tell her. Anko nodded her head, looking up, staring out of the lone window in the room. Sai walked up to her, peeking over her shoulder. What does the note say exactly? Pillage and take all. Are we sure this isn't just a huge ploy? Shizuka said, leaning on the wall. Her eyes closed in thought. Narumi shook her head, leaning on the desk, her nails drawing circles on the wood in thought. The blue flames have never been one to back down from a threat. It seems this letter was meant for someone else entirely until I got my hands on it, she said, making Anko nod. The purple-haired woman pointed to the corner of the page. There are coordinates here. It isn't that far away from here. I went there last night. It's another small cabin. There were about 10 shinobi guarding the entrance. Whatever is in there, they don't want anyone finding it. Narumi said, taking a peek over at her brother. He was standing next to Anko with a hand in his pocket. His eyes were narrowed in thought. Naruto ni how do you know about genus wood? Naruto shrugged as he looked away from her. Shisui Nisan taught me about a bunch of different materials that are good for weapon making, he said, ending the conversation, making Narumi frown. She instinctively clenched her fists around the desk in irritation. Her nails dragged across the wood, letting the unpleasant sound quietly echo under the desk. Anko sensed the atmosphere start to change and quickly intervened, stepping closer to Narumi, handing her the paper. The Namikaze girl grabbed hold of the page before Anko began to speak. So what was your plan before we arrived? I was gonna message To-san and see if he could possibly send backup, no more than a team or two. While there seems to be quite a number of them, they don't seem to be very strong. The strongest seem to be about a chunin in terms of strength. Enko nodded before looking back over to her team. She knew Sai and Shizuka could handle themselves well, but part of her wanted to back off this mission for Naruto's sake. She was confident in his abilities as a shinobi. He seemed to be improving faster than Sai and Shizuka during training. Damn kid. Don't make me regret doing this. Enko thought as she looked back to Narumi, following her eyes as she glanced over to Naruto. No doubt the redhead was thinking the same thing. Enko scoffed at that. Then when the sun starts to set, we will make our move on them. We will divide up into 2 teams. Naruto and Shizuka will be with me, and Narumi and Sai will partner up. In all due respect, Enko-san, but I think I would be best paired with Naruto ni. Enko narrowed her eyes at the girl, crossing her arms over her chest. Naruto felt his spine stiffen as he looked over at his sister in shock. Narumi felt her resolve start to crumble as all eyes were now fixated onto her. Even her brother was giving her a suspicious look. Shizuka scowled in her direction, tightening her arms around herself. And why do you believe that, Narumi-san? Naruto-kun here has worked longer with his team than anyone else here. So I believe my assignment was for the best, she said, making Narumi physically flinch at the Junin. She lowered her head and clenched her fists, her hands starting to turn pale. I don't mind, Enko-sensei. Narumi snapped her head over in shock to Naruto, her eyes perking up as a smile started to form on her face. The rest of Team 11 looked at him in shock, however. Enko started at Naruto, her eyes shining with confusion as they locked eyes. Naruto kept his face blank as he nodded to his sensei, the both of them sharing a silent conversation. Enko after a while reluctantly nodded her head to the blonde, biting her lips slightly. Fine. Shizuka and Sai with me, and Naruto and Narumi together. We will meet in the forest just outside the cabin at sunset. Several hours flew by for Team 11 and their newest member for the mission. The sun was starting to set, basking over Tizuna town. The team all huddled together in the trees, scanning the area. Making no sound, the group moved closer until the cabin they were looking for finally came into view. Stopping in a bushel, Enko raised her hands, stopping the group. Thanks to the sunset, the forest was darker than usual, with a tiny bit of light shining through the cabin's windows. Several shinobi stalked the outside perimeter as they walked rhythmically, paced back and forth, at least a group of 10. Enko shifted her eyes to the outlining trees, trying to sense another shinobi who could have possibly been hiding. If her plan works, then they should be able to finish this mission without any difficulty. Letting herself bask in the darkness for a moment longer, she let her eyes linger back to his team. Sai, in 5 minuets I want you to make several birds to distract the guards on the left-hand side. Once distracted, I want you, Shizuka, to kill all those distracted as we make our way to the inside. Narumi and Naruto, I trust you both to do the same on your side, understand? Do not start until you hear Shizuka make her move. I sense no other shinobi hidden anywhere, so it should go smoothly. All the kids nodded before Sai, Shizuka and Enko all disappeared from sight, Enko taking a moment longer to give Naruto a reassuring nod of her head. The forest was eerily silent as Narumi and Naruto ventured further to the right, watching the 5 guards wander around. Narumi gave Naruto a sideways glance as they crouched in silence. Naruto didn't look at her at all since the meeting in Kisu's room and was nowhere to be seen until it was time to meet for their mission. While it would have been fairly easy for her to sense his chakra, she didn't know what his chakra signature felt like. It was foreign, almost indistinguishable. Narumi was happy that he chose to work with her on this mission, and that he even agreed to her decision on being her partner on her team. But the longer she stayed with him, the more she didn't seem to know about her brother. Each passing second seemed like an eternity. She had no idea of his skill set, his speed, what he was capable of. Had he even made his first kill? Or was this his first mission outside the village? He was only a genin after all. That mere thought alone sent waves of guilt through her. We left you behind, didn't